Hi, folks. Welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Supposed to be a warm-up today in the 70s here in the Ozarks, which, I mean, I know that's not hot or anything, but, you know, it's 10, 15 degrees warmer than it's been the last few days for highs. And then we'll, again, dip back into normal weather, you know, a little cooler weather after the next few days of warm-up. Other than that, I mean, it's back to being dry again. We've already, even though we had rain just a few days ago, we're already back to fire warning. This is the time of year. This is for those of you that live out in the country, especially if you live in a forest region like the Ozarks. This time of the year starts wildfire season for us. You know, out west, it's already been going on. This is wildfire season for us because, as you can see, all these beautiful leaves are hitting the ground, creating a lot of fuel, and they're drying out. And so this is that time of year. So for those of you that are kind of new to living out, you know, homesteading and whatever, best advice I can tell you is to keep fuel away from your home. And when I say fuel, I mean this stuff. You know, keep your house around your area, around your barn, your buildings and stuff kind of cleaned up so that it doesn't have fuel for the fire. You know, if you do burn, keep an eye on it. You'd be surprised how fires can start by just one little ember burning and floating away in the air. So it's that time of the year, and it'll peak for us here probably sometime during February and March. That's when it really starts to kind of peak and heat up, and we're dealing with it. And then we get the spring rains come in, and it kind of tones it down for a while. So for a peaceful administration, we sure are talking a lot about war and military action. I don't think that it was just a nothing when the president says he wants to change the name of the Department of Defense to Department of War, because that's what's happening. Yesterday it came out in the news that the Pentagon is planning strike missions inside of Mexico to take out drug cartel. This has been talked about for a while. The Mexican president has, you know, responded in the past that she is not happy about this. I don't know that there's much they can do, but there are plans for that. Then also it came out yesterday that there's also military plans to strike in areas of Iraq. So Iraq is also on the, I mean, Iraq is just, it's just one of those places that, you know, Iraq and Syria and stuff, that's just, you know, it's not a big deal. Every president has to drop a few bombs over there, right? So that's being planned. The Nigeria topic is still going on, that it's possible that we're going to do this. The Nigerian government has fired back, saying that, you know, they are not going to tolerate this. They're not going to allow the United States to come in and take over their country and all this kind of stuff. And there are speculation, or there is speculation out there that Nigeria may be the new Iraq. I am not going to deny the fact that Christians are being, you know, persecuted and slaughtered in Nigeria. I've talked about that for several years now. So that's, to me, not an argument, an issue to argue about. But also remember these things, these facts. Nigeria has a large oil supply. Nigeria has a large gold supply. Nigeria is the top business partner for China on the continent of Africa. They do something like $21 billion, $22 billion in trade a year with China, and it's growing, and China is really trying to make a foothold in Nigeria. It's, I think, the largest or most populated country on the continent. And so when you factor in all of those things, kind of makes you wonder if there's more motives to this than just persecution. And then, of course, there's Venezuela. That's still on the slate, even though the president has said, no, we're not going to invade. We're not going to go to war against Israel, against Venezuela. And I think that if you kind of look at the words that he's using, he's not really saying that we're not going to attack them. It's that we're not going to go to war. A week or so ago or two, he was questioned by a reporter asking if there would be a declaration of war. And he's like, no, I don't think we'll do that. We're just going to go and we're going to kill bad people. I think that it's possible that they're holding back on military operations because, as you remember a week ago also, the president ordered the CIA to go in and do secret missions in Venezuela, which is probably assassination missions. And so I think they're holding back with the military, hoping that they can take, Maduro out and, end the problem that way, and may not have to do as much military action if he's gone. So that's a possibility. But I certainly don't think that that's off the table. China has China and Russia, since all this has happened, has kind of renewed their commitment to supporting each other, to supporting Venezuela. And this is all after, the president went over there and met with Xi Jinping the other day and, claimed that they have a strong relationship and everything's going to be fine with us and China. So China is really good at playing both sides. I think that they look at, trade as that's just a business deal. That's not war. But who knows? So the point is that there's a lot of conflict going on. Iran is still, I think, a serious target. It was just the other day, Iran was saying that, they're not dismantling anything. They're not going to stop producing anything. They're going to produce more, all that kind of stuff. So that's just, increasing the chances of, strikes against them. And then also with the Gaza Strip with Israel and Hamas, this is something that's not being talked about in the news at all. Left, right, alternative media, like no one is talking about this, but there's still a lot of conflict going on. There have been multiple attacks, bombing raids, things like that happen between Israel and Hamas. I mean, the peace deal is just non-existent there, even though governments and media are all still claiming it does exist. It's not existent. There's been several hundred people killed in Hamas since the start of the peace deal, multiple strikes, all that kind of stuff. So that's the state of international affairs when it comes to war. The other thing that I think is really important, and I keep telling you this, that this next subject is one of the few things that I think all of this other stuff is distracting us from. And I'm speaking of the state of the U.S. economy. I talked about just a couple of days ago about how the Fed is creating money, is sending money to U.S. banks to put liquidity in them through bank repo. And again, another $24 billion was sent into the U.S. banking system, making in the last 5 days alone $125 billion from the Fed into U.S. banks, giving them money. This is the most since the 2008 financial crisis. That's significant, the most in a short amount of time. 125 billion or so in 5 days. Also at the same time, the Fed is back to printing money. Just in the last 4 or 5 days, they've created about $37 billion in U.S. money, U.S. currency. I mean, that's pretty significant, folks. Commercial loans, commercial lending. There is the most delinquencies and foreclosures on commercial lending than pretty much ever, even more than during the 2008 financial crisis. That's significant. Home purchases are at the lowest level they've been in decades. People aren't buying homes. These are all really, really strong signs that the economy is screeching to a halt and maybe even on the verge of a collapse for a while. They said yesterday that they're going to release emergency funds for food stamps. It'll only fund about half, so everyone that gets food stamps should get 50%. There's not been any word that I've seen of actually when that's going to happen. So that may calm things for a while, but the shutdown is still happening, and I have a feeling that the White House doesn't really have any interest in ending the shutdown. I think it's good for them, and again, I think that, like I said the other day, if they can stretch this out till 60 days, after 60 days, so it's 61 days, all the federal employees that's been furloughed, they can say you're done. You don't come back to work. You don't have a job. So right now, if the shutdown ends, they have to by law bring all those employees back and pay them all that back pay. But at 61 days, they don't have to. At 61 days, they can cut them all loose and move on. And I know that if that were to happen, it would be spun by the president and the White House as a great thing because it's reducing costs and reducing government, and most conservatives and libertarians would say, yes, that's great. But what I strongly believe is that it's not going to actually reduce government in any way. It will just remove a bunch of employees and be replaced with artificial intelligence. So I think that's a possibility. Now, I could be totally wrong. They could work out a budget deal this week, get it passed this week. It's possible. It is possible. The numbers, the odds, everything's all a betting game. And so all of the websites that are showing odds, they're showing that it's probably going to last at least to mid to end December, is what everyone's believing right now. And if that happens, you're getting into that 60 days. So be interesting to see what happens with all that. I what I've been trying to convey to all of you, and I think most of you are probably getting it, is that all of this stuff that's happening, it is exactly what you and I and you and others have talked about for the last few years of what it's going to be like switching over to a new system. And that's what's happening. This new world order, this great reset, whatever you want to call it, the golden age, it is a switch from an old system to the new system. And that's what we're watching. That's why we're watching the dollar go down. We're watching the American economy collapse. They have to have that happen, or at least on the verge. It has to be really bad to the point that it's just complete chaos so that they can, usher in a new digitally backed currency. Oh, we've got this figured out. Don't worry. Don't worry. Yes, I know debt is bad. I know the dollar's worthless. I know the market's it's bursting and, all these things. But we've got this digital backed currency, and it's going to be fine. Everything will be okay. And of course, what comes along with it is a complete, digital AI backed system. This is what they want. They've been very clear. Most of you know this. This is not being made up. It doesn't take that much digging around to figure out that is exactly what they're wanting. And I think that they have that in their crosshairs right now. I think that's the motivation behind most everything that's happening. Most of these wars that are going on is to procure resources that are needed to fuel all of these AI and digital systems, whether it be oil for energy, or rare earth minerals and metals to actually manufacture this stuff. That's what's going on. And so, when we look at why Venezuela, we're talking about drugs from Venezuela when, depending what numbers you look at, drugs, coming into this country only originating from Venezuela either at 3% or maybe 10 or 11%. There's several other countries that's way worse on the list. So why them? Well, because they got a lot of the goods. Nigeria, maybe they have the most, the highest on when it comes to Christian persecution, but they're certainly not the only one. So why them all of a sudden? Oil, gold, Greenland. Why Greenland? Why all of a sudden Greenland? Well, it's the location and it's minerals and it's power, energy and stuff that's located there. It's not a coincidence, folks. And it's happening real time and pretty fast. And so I want to, again, like I do every day, strongly encourage you to be preparing yourself every day. You know, your stuff that you have, you need to be stocking up on as much food as you can, water source, water supply, water filtration, medical, emergency medical and long-term medical, heat source. You're getting into the wintertime, defense. You need to have that nailed down, community, training skills, and then, of course, the ability to kind of survive and be self-sufficient as much as possible. Those things you need to be doing, because the system is radically and rapidly changing. And you need to be getting ready for it. The next, 2 years from now, I think a lot of things will be almost unrecognizable. 5 years from now, if we make it that long, if we're still around by then, it'll be a whole new world that we live in. So you need to be stepping it up, folks, all of us. Get your houses in order and prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next video.